It's strange how fast comfort turns into danger. All it takes is letting the wrong person feel at home. I used to think the scariest thing about living with strangers was bad habits. Stuff like unwashed dishes, late rent, loud music, and the list goes on. I never considered that the real danger might be the quiet ones, the kind who are so quiet you forget they're there until something reminds you. This happened a couple of years ago, when I was still trying to get my life together after a breakup. Rent was going up, so I took the first decent apartment I could find. Nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms in an old building with a weird smell in the hallway. The landlord seemed fine, and the place felt quiet. When Aiden moved in, I thought I'd finally found a decent roommate. He was polite, paid rent early, and mostly kept to himself. The kind of person you barely notice because everything seems easy. We split the bills, took turns cleaning, and nodded at each other in passing. The apartment wasn't much, just 2 rooms with a thin wall between them. I stopped locking my bedroom door after the first week. Sounds stupid now, but I told myself that trusting people makes a place feel like home. Looking back, there were small things I should have paid attention to, but I didn't. It started with my toothbrush, just a cheap, plain one from a multi-pack. A few mornings after Aiden moved in, I started finding it in different spots. One day it was in the holder, another day on the counter, and once it was lying flat on the edge of the sink. I never left it like that. I figured I must have moved it without noticing, but it kept showing up in different places. A few days later, it was my phone charger. I always wind the cord around the plug so it doesn't tangle, but one night it was stretched across the floor, like someone had used it. Aiden had the same kind, so I figured he probably grabbed mine by mistake. After that, more things started to add up. My bedroom door would be cracked open when I came home, even though I always shut it. A cup I'd left in the sink would end up on the counter. My keys were never quite where I'd left them. Nothing was missing or broken, just moved. I kept catching little things like that, but I didn't say anything. No point making it into a big deal. About a week later, Aiden brought me a small potted plant. He said it might make the place feel less empty. It was a little plant with green leaves in a plain pot. I set it on my desk by the window, gave it some water, and didn't think much about it. After that, the vibe in the apartment changed. It's hard to explain, but something about it just didn't feel right. I started noticing it during the small talks we'd have, those casual moments in the kitchen or around the apartment. He'd drop things into conversation that didn't make sense. He mentioned one of my friends by name, someone he'd never met. Then it was a joke I'd told my mom on the phone a few nights earlier. Another time he mentioned the nickname my old boss used to call me, something I'd only ever told my best friends. There was no way he could have known any of it. From then on, I stopped taking calls in my room. Whenever I needed to talk to someone, I'd step out to the balcony or head outside. One night I came home late from work, around 11. The apartment was dark, and Aiden's door was closed. I went straight to my room and it smelled like something burnt. Aiden must have cooked something earlier and the smell had drifted in, so I walked over to open the window to air it out. My elbow knocked the plant sitting on my desk and it hit the floor with soil spilling all over the place. I shook my head and got down to clean up the mess. As I was scooping the soil back into the pot, I saw something buried in there. It wasn't a rock or part of the roots. I pulled it out, brushed some dirt away, and it took me a few seconds to realize what I was holding. A small black device, barely the size of a USB drive, covered in soil. I set it down on the floor carefully, without making a sound. My hands started shaking and I felt this wave of cold wash over me. This thing had been here the whole time, from the day Aiden gave me that plant. I'd watered it every few days, kept it alive on my desk, even thanked him for being so thoughtful. All that time, this device had been sitting there, listening to everything that happened in my room, every phone call with my family, every word I said when I thought I was alone. I realized I hadn't locked my door since that first week Aiden moved in. He could have come in whenever he wanted while I was at work. Then something worse hit me. If that thing was still on, he must have heard the crash. I kneeled down on the floor, staring at it and trying to figure out what to do next. It was past 11 at night and I had nowhere to go right away. My mind was racing, but I knew I needed to get out of here. I just had to wait until morning. I grabbed my desk chair and wedged it under the doorknob, then pushed my dresser in front of the door. I didn't know if it would really stop him from coming into my room, but it might buy me a little time. I turned off the light and sat on my bed in the dark, phone in my hand, trying not to make a sound. For maybe 20 minutes, it was completely quiet. Then I heard Aiden's door open. I could hear him walking down the hallway, and he stopped right outside my room. My heart was beating so fast I didn't dare move. The doorknob started to turn, slow and careful, until it pressed against the dresser and stopped. After a long pause, there was a light knock. Aiden called my name and asked if I was still awake. I didn't answer. I just sat there, frozen and barely breathe. He tried the handle again and it rattled against the dresser. A moment later, he started talking in a calm and polite way, saying he'd heard a crash and wanted to check if everything was okay. I kept quiet, and after a few minutes, I heard him walk back to his room and close the door. For a second, I thought it was finally over, but it wasn't. I could still hear him moving around. Slow steps, pacing back and forth. The floor creaked every time he passed a certain spot. It went on like that for hours. Every time I thought maybe he'd gone to sleep, the footsteps would start again. I didn't sleep that entire night. I sat there watching the door, listening to the creaking that wouldn't stop. Around 6 in the morning, it finally went quiet. About 30 minutes later, I heard the front door open and close. I waited another 15 minutes to make sure he was really gone before I got out of bed. I opened my door to check the hallway. It was empty. No sign of Aiden anywhere. I grabbed my keys and left the apartment. I ran down the stairs as fast as I could and didn't stop until I reached the park about 2 blocks away. There were already people around, morning joggers, dog walkers, and seeing them made me feel a little safer. I sat down on a bench and called the police. My hands were still shaking as I told them what had happened, and they said they'd send someone over. After that, I called Emma. She got here before the police did and stayed with me. I realized how insane it all sounded when I tried to explain everything to Emma. The police showed up about 40 minutes later and took my statement. They asked if Aiden had ever acted in a way that made me feel unsafe. I said no, but told them I'd found a small device hidden in a plant and had spent the whole night locked in my room because I was scared. One of the officers asked where it was, and I realized I'd left it in my room when I ran out. They said they'd go back with me to check it and talk to Aiden if he was still there. We walked back to the apartment together, and I felt uneasy the whole way. When we got inside, Aiden's bedroom door was open. One of the officers called out, but there was no answer. They looked inside, and most of his stuff was gone. Clothes, a few personal things, but the furniture was still there. It looked like he'd left in a hurry. The police followed me to my room, and I checked the floor where I'd left the device, but it was gone. Aiden must have come back after I left and taken it. One of the officers said they couldn't do much without it. They looked around for a little while longer and then left the apartment. Emma told me I should pack up my things and stay with her for a while. I never went back to the apartment after that day. I called the landlord and told him about Aiden and everything that had happened. I said he could keep my security deposit as compensation. A few days later, Emma helped me pick up some of my things when we were sure Aiden wouldn't be there. About a week later, the police called and said they couldn't find any record of Aiden in their system. The phone number he'd provided was disconnected. The addresses he'd listed on the rental form didn't exist, and the references he gave turned out to be fake numbers. One of the officers said it was like he'd never existed at all. I moved back in with my parents for a few months because I couldn't handle living with another stranger. Even now, 2 years later, I still live alone. Every time I see those roommate ads online, I catch myself wondering who might answer them. Till today, I still think about Aiden, who he really was, what he wanted, and if he's still out there somewhere, being the perfect, quiet roommate, keeping to himself, while someone else waters that same little plant on their desk, never realizing what's buried inside it.